Samantha's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled through the dense forest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The night was pitch black, the moon barely a sliver in the sky, and the trees closed in around her like shadowy giants. Somewhere behind her, the man was still out there, the killer who had been stalking her for miles. She had been on a road trip with friends, taking a shortcut through a remote highway when the car broke down. When her friends went to look for help, she stayed behind to keep an eye on the car. Hours passed, and they never came back. That's when she saw the stranger. He had appeared from the edge of the forest, his face obscured by the hood of his coat. At first, he seemed helpful, offering to call for assistance, but something in his smile had unsettled her, a strange glint in his eyes that made her skin crawl. Then she saw it, a bloodstain on his sleeve. Before she could react, he lunged at her, a knife flashing in the dim light. Samantha had barely managed to escape, sprinting into the forest in a blind panic. Now, the only sounds were her footfalls on the underbrush and the distant rustling of leaves. No doubt the killer was still following her, moving silently through the woods. She had to keep moving, had to get away. Every now and then, she thought she heard a twig snap or the faintest whisper of footsteps behind her. But when she turned around, there was nothing, only the darkness. Her body ached from running, her legs shaking with exhaustion. She wanted to stop, to catch her breath, but the fear drove her forward. Every shadow seemed to pulse with hidden danger. Every gust of wind felt like icy fingers reaching for her. Somewhere in the distance, she heard a low chuckle. It was faint, almost too far away to be real, but she knew it was him. He was playing with her. Suddenly, the trees opened up into a small clearing, and in the center was a dilapidated cabin. It looked abandoned, its wooden walls worn by time and neglect, but it was her only option. She could hide there. Maybe she could find a phone or something to defend herself with. Samantha ran to the cabin, pushing the door open with trembling hands. Inside, the air was stale, and the faint smell of rot lingered. The cabin was small, just a single room with a table and a few pieces of broken furniture. But there in the corner was a trapdoor leading down to what looked like a cellar. Without thinking, she pried it open and climbed down, pulling the door shut above her. The cellar was cold and damp, and the darkness was so thick she could barely see. She pressed her ear to the trapdoor, listening intently. For a few minutes there was nothing but silence. Maybe she had lost him. But then the cabin door creaked open. Her blood ran cold as she heard slow, deliberate footsteps creaking across the floor above her. The killer had found the cabin. He was inside. She clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle her breathing, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. The footsteps stopped. She strained to hear, trying to figure out where he was. Then a soft scraping sound, a chair being dragged across the floor. He was sitting down, waiting. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The killer didn't leave. He was patient, knowing that eventually she would have to come out. Samantha's legs ached from crouching, her breath shallow and ragged. She didn't know how much longer she could stay hidden. Then something horrible happened. She heard a quiet, steady tapping on the trapdoor. Tap, tap. Her blood turned to ice. He knew. The tapping stopped, replaced by soft laughter from above. The killer spoke, his voice low and taunting. "I can wait, Samantha. You can't stay down there forever." Her stomach dropped. He knew her name. How did he know her name? In the darkness of the cellar, Samantha felt around desperately for something, anything, that she could use to defend herself. Her fingers brushed against cold metal. It was an old rusted pipe, heavy enough to swing. She gripped it tightly, trying to calm her trembling hands. The floorboards above creaked again. His footsteps moved away, then stopped. Silence. Samantha stayed frozen, her mind racing. Was he gone, or was he just trying to lure her out? She had no choice but to wait, every second dragging on like an eternity. After what felt like hours, she finally gathered the courage to lift the trapdoor, just a crack. The cabin was dark, and there was no sign of him. Slowly, she climbed out, gripping the pipe tightly, ready to defend herself. But as she stood up, something caught her eye. A message scrawled in blood on the wall, smeared in large, erratic letters. "See you soon." Her heart stopped. The room was empty, but she knew he was still out there. And somehow, he always knew where to find her.